Welcome to Heart Health, a 6-week series presented to you by the Optimal Life Lifestyle Management Program. My name is Emily Joseph, and I am one of the registered dietitians here in the fitness facility. If at any time you feel you need to make an appointment with either myself or Jody Couts, you are always welcome to do so, as we are here to help you meet your nutritional needs. This is week 2 in the Heart Health series. Last week, in the first week of class, we discussed what your heart health numbers mean, looking at specifically blood pressure, systolic and diastolic numbers, as well as cholesterol readings, HDL, LDL, triglycerides, and total cholesterol. We also discussed what is cholesterol, how is it made, and what foods does it come from, and how can we help to re-energize and refresh ourselves to add to more optimal health. Please take a moment to reflect on your weekly pledge as we discussed ways that people found were successful for them last week in dealing with re-energizing. So we had filled out that half sheet of paper listing ways that we could quickly re-energize ourselves during the workday or during the car ride home or at home. Some of the success stories from last week, somebody shared that they made a goal to walk their dog for an extra 20 minutes this week to help re-energize themselves, and they were very successful in doing so and plan to continue to make that a goal for the rest of this month. Somebody else stated that they listened to their favorite CD on the way to work, and that helped them to just mentally re-energize and get ready for the day ahead. So please take a moment to reflect on what you did, and did you find anything successful? Is there anything you want to change, or perhaps you weren't quite ready to make that change, but you filled out the paper and plan on making that change sometime soon, which I hope you do work on at least implementing one thing. So this week, we are talking about nutrition and the effects it has on our heart, specifically related to fat, salt, and sugar. What is fat? Well, fat is something that we need in our diet because it helps absorb important vitamins, A, D, E, and K. So those are known as fat-soluble vitamins. Meaning we have to eat fat in order for them to be absorbed and be effective in doing their role in our body. It also provides energy to the body. The recommendations say 20 to 35% of our calories come from fat, okay? And there's two main types of fat, saturated fat and unsaturated fat, and most foods contain sources of both. Now there's two types of fat that actually raise our cholesterol levels, and this was briefly touched on last week. But to recap, saturated fat and trans fat raise cholesterol levels within inside of our body. And trans fat is a type of unsaturated fat. Now total fat is saturated fat plus unsaturated fat. So that would be something that you might see on a food label, which is what we'll talk about next week. Now, what is saturated fat? Well, saturated fat is a type of fat that raises cholesterol levels, and it's found mostly in foods from animal origins, with a few exceptions from plants such as coconut oil. Okay, so these are things such as cheese, high-fat meats, so red meats, in particular beef, steak, have really high levels of saturated fat, but all foods from animal origin do contain saturated fat. And then like whole milk, butter, those are other examples of saturated fat. Now trans fat, like I said, is a type of unsaturated fat that is not the kind that we want to consume frequently, okay? So this is found in baked goods, specifically cookies, pies, crackers, okay, fried foods, stick margarine, shortening. Okay, those are a few examples of trans fat. And trans fat is, so saturated fat, looking back here, we want to consume less than 10% of our total caloric intake from saturated fat. In trans fat, we want to consume as minimal as possible. So 1% or less would be ideal, but we want to consume this just very, very infrequently. Now, eating too much saturated and trans fat can raise our risk of elevating the cholesterol levels and increase your risk of developing heart disease. Now, the type of fat that we eat is important, okay? So that 20 to 35% of recommended fat intake, it's important that it's the type of fat we're choosing. So we want to choose unsaturated fat more than saturated fat, with the exception of trans fat. We do not want to choose trans fat. We want to choose the better health benefit fats, which would be the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated. Okay, those are two categories of unsaturated fat. So we want to, polyunsaturated and monounsaturated are the two types of fat that we want to consume more of or replace in our diet. So we want to replace saturated fat and trans fat with polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, polyunsaturated fats would be things like salmon here, walnuts, ground flaxseed, and olive oil. And then monounsaturated fats would be olive oil, once again, avocado, almonds, peanuts. Okay, so those are examples. So a replacement example, so if you were to replace a steak or a burger, for example, with a piece of salmon once a week, that would be a healthy switch for more optimal heart health, okay? Because you're taking out saturated fat and you're replacing it with polyunsaturated fat, which has a better effect on our overall heart health. If you were consuming a lot of chip dip, for example, with your chips, if you were to replace that, chips are high in trans fat, right, and saturated fat because they're fried, and then chip dip is typically made out of like heavy cream or full fat animal products. If you were to replace that with celery and peanut butter, you would be removing trans fat from your diet, and you would be removing saturated fat, and you would be adding in a source of fiber from the celery, a vegetable, and a monounsaturated fat from the peanut butter. Okay, so that would be a healthier heart health switch. Now here's a comparison of dietary fats, and I want you to just take a look at, more importantly from this diagram is the saturated fat that I wanted to point out. Because we know coconut oil, I said, is a type of non-animal product that is very, very high in saturated fat. And so there's a lot of craze about coconut oil being really great for you, but it's keeping in mind this right here, oops, where's my cursor, coconut oil, 87% of a serving, 87% of the components of coconut oil is saturated fat, meaning it increases cholesterol levels, okay? Butter follows secondly. And then there's palm oil, also a plant, lard, right? Cottonseed oil, peanut oil, these are all plants. Olive oil, look at that. Yeah, it has some saturated fat, but the majority of it is monounsaturated fat, which is better for us. Okay? So these are just examples, but more importantly, I wanted to point out the high amount of saturated fat in coconut oil. It passes butter. Okay? So just that's important to take note of. Now, plants, foods that come from plants do not have cholesterol, and they have low or minimal amounts of fat. Okay, so these are things like fruits and vegetables, beans, brown rice, whole grains, oatmeal. Plants actually contain fiber, and fiber helps to lower cholesterol levels. So not only do these plant items have high amounts of antioxidants, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, low in calories. They're low in fat, but they also lower our cholesterol levels. Why? Because they contain fiber. And fiber acts as a natural cholesterol reducer. Kind of think of it as a scrub brush, right? So I think of like broccoli having all those little bristles on there. It's helping to clean out your insides. It's lowering cholesterol, okay? But almost all plants have fiber in them. However, if you cook a plant item in an animal product, so if you're cooking your oatmeal and you're cooking it in butter and full whole milk, well then now it contains cholesterol, okay? So it kind of cancels each other out. So the fiber recommendation is 28 to 30 grams per day. Most Americans only get 12 grams. So here's a picture I took. Yes, that's my hand. This is one of the models that Jody and I have created to better represent common day food items that we consume as Americans and the fiber content, okay? So here you can see orange juice way down here. So if you were to have a quarter cup of orange juice, there's absolutely no fiber, none. If you eat the whole orange, skip a few test tubes over here, look at that, you have 1.9 grams of fiber. So it would be better to eat the whole orange versus the orange juice. Not only is it more satisfying to chew something, but you're getting those nutrients, there's no processing, and you're getting a lot of fiber, okay? And then if you can see here, so going back to the orange juice next to it, you have white bread, one slice, there's just barely enough there, right? 0.7 grams. Honey bunches of oats, so that would be a serving size, 1 gram, okay? There's better types of cereal, like oatmeal, or if you were to swap out your honey bunches of oats for half a cup of oatmeal, look at that, 5.7 grams, okay? A cup of broccoli has 2.4 grams of fiber. A slice of whole wheat bread is 4 grams. Bran flakes, 5 grams. And black beans, you only need to eat a quarter cup of black beans to get a whole 15 grams. That would be like adding a quarter cup scoop to your salad at lunch, or adding it in to your dinner if you're making chili. Instead of using the full serving of meat, like turkey meat, adding in a quarter cup of black beans to your portion, look at that, 15 grams of fiber. So those are ways, that's why fiber helps to, it lowers cholesterol, right? So how can we make healthier fat swaps though? Well, we can choose low-fat milk versus whole milk, choosing low-fat Greek yogurt versus the whole milk, okay? Whole milk or whole full-fat dairy tends to be, currently in the media, it's trending as being better for you. However, especially in terms of heart health, it's important to remember full-fat dairy contains high amounts of saturated fat, and when we're trying to take care of our heart, we want to choose lower fat options of dairy, okay? Limiting our egg consumption to no more than 6 times a week if you have high cholesterol, okay? So yes, it does contain lots of really great nutrients. The yolk contains B vitamins. However, you know, we still want to limit our animal product consumption. Reducing the red meat, okay, adding in beans or mushrooms. Mushrooms actually contain a flavor known as umami, and umami is the meaty flavor. So you can, you know, that's why a lot of like vegetarian or vegan dishes, they have mushrooms in there with beans because it gives it that meat-like flavor. So that's always an option. You know, swap out half of your meat in a dish for beans and mushrooms. Like if you're making a meatloaf, for example, you're not taking away any bulk, but you're adding in nutrients. And then you could saute with olive oil instead of butter. Okay, now looking at salt. So too much salt, can have an effect on your heart health. So the recommended intake is no more than 2,300 milligrams per day. However, if you have a heart condition, or you're watching your blood pressure, or you just want to try and have the most optimal heart health you can, the ideal amount is no more than 1,500 milligrams per day. as Americans, it's really hard for most people to stay below the 2,300 milligram recommendations. And that's because the top 6 foods listed on the next slide have the highest count of sodium. And these are the most commonly consumed foods in America. So no wonder if we're consuming these upcoming 6 foods, it's hard to stay within the recommended intake. So bread, okay? So bread, although it doesn't have a high amount of sodium, it is an important reminder that frequent consumptions of lower sodium foods can quickly add up and contribute to our total intake. So a slice of bread may have, for example, about 300 milligrams of sodium, okay? Well, if you have toast and peanut butter in the morning, there's 300 milligrams, right? And then you have a sandwich at lunch, a full sandwich, there's 2 more slices. We're already at 900 milligrams. And the ideal amount for watching our heart health is 1,500. And then you have dinner roll at dinner, there's another 300, while we're at 1,200 milligrams just in bread. We haven't even added in other food items. Cold cuts and cured meats, so the way to preserve them is by adding in sodium, okay, or some form of sodium preservative, okay. So that's really important to watch your intake of. So that would be like deli meats, okay, or salamis, you know, different things like that. Pizza. So pizza is a huge one. One slice of pizza, depending on where you get it, what toppings you put on it, could easily add up to that 1,500 milligrams. Okay, so why? Well, the crust has salt in it. Cheese can be very high in sodium to add flavor, and it helps with brining it. The pepperoni on there is a cold cut meat. And then sauce. Pizza sauce actually contains a high amount of sodium and sugar. And that's they add the sugar to help cut the acidity, and then typically you don't want a marinara sauce too sweet, so you add in salt. Rotisserie chicken, or just chicken in general. So if certain brands of frozen chicken, actually they inject them with a sodium product to help better preserve them or make them look more plump. Okay, so that's where reading labels becomes especially important. Looking for sodium or broth or brined in, you know, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank there. Looking for clue words like that on the front of the packaging, and then fine print somewhere on the packaging indicates there's extra sodium in this product. Okay, and these rotisserie chickens seen here in the picture are notorious for having grease on them. Not only do they have a lot of fat, but they add sodium to help make it preserve it, right, and add flavor. You want that really good, that juicy, you know, flavorful piece of chicken. Chicken soups, okay, or just canned soup in general. So typically a serving of a canned soup has anywhere from 800 to 900 milligrams, but most people eat a full can, okay, because you know, it's a small, it looks small, a can looks small, so we're going to eat the whole thing. Easily, if you eat a can of a soup, you could hit that 2,300 milligrams, no problem. And then sandwiches. So once again, we have the bread, we have that deli meat on there, if you add in the cheese, and then dressings can be high in sodium, you know, depending on what type of dressing, you know, the condiments. So those are the top six saltiest foods in the American diet. Now here, once again, this is a little blurry, I apologize. Here is another food model that we created to look at to visually show you common food items consumed and their sodium content. So a cup of Campbell's chicken soup right here, 1,700 milligrams of sodium, and that's not even if you eat the full can, right? That's just 1 cup. So if you were to eat that full can, you'd almost fill 1.5 containers right here. McDonald's quarter pounder with cheese, 1,152 milligrams of sodium. A frozen chicken pot pie, and that's a small one, has 990 milligrams. A tablespoon of soy sauce, 920. And this is accurate representation too. This is not to scale. This is exact. A tablespoon of soy sauce. If you're getting sushi, or you're making a stir fry, or you're eating at an Asian restaurant or a Chinese restaurant, it is next to impossible to only eat a tablespoon of soy sauce because of the servings that they give you or what it's cooked in, etc. A small slice of cheese pizza. So that's just the plain old cheese, small slice, no meat, no toppings, just a regular crust, not a thick crust, 640. 2 ounces of deli ham, 520. So if you think of it, how many times if you go to Subway, did they just put only 2 ounces of deli ham on there? No, they wanted, meat, really thick meat. Think of Arby's, their slogan, we have the meats. Well, that's a lot of sodium, because chances are they're not putting 2 ounces on the sandwich. 2 cups of movie popcorn, 330 milligrams, and then an ounce of tortilla chips, 150. Once again, an ounce of tortilla chips. If you're in a Mexican restaurant and you're sitting there eating the chips and guac or chips and salsa, chances are you're eating more than an ounce. So how can we reduce our salt intake? And there is a handout that is attached to the newsletter that contained this PowerPoint presentation. You're welcome to download that provides you with more tips and tricks for reducing salt intake. And how can we add flavor, right? So if we're taking away salt, how can I add flavor? That handout explains it. But we can use herbs and spices, increasing at-home cooking versus eating out frequently. So if you are cooking at home, you have more control over what you're putting into your food versus eating out, right? When you go to a restaurant, a lot of times if a chef over-sweetens something, they put too much sugar, they add salt. If they add too much salt and it's salty tasting, they add sugar. So sometimes they don't go off the recipe. There's no control. At home, you can control it. Choosing lower sodium or no sodium food items. Okay, so this picture here of this chicken bouillon says sodium free, right? So we know that that's sodium free. It's a good indicator. You don't even have to flip it over, right? Removing the skin from meat. So here, this is skinless chicken breast. Looks great. It's been grilled, right? It has good flavor. There's no skin on there. Perhaps they even seasoned it with herbs and spices instead of salt. And then adding beans to a dish or sandwich instead of packaged cold cut or cured meat is one option. Okay, so if you're going to do, like I suggested in the fat slide, replacing half of your meat with beans, guess what? You're also cutting down on not only fat, but you're cutting down on sodium and you're adding in other great nutrients. Okay, and finally, looking at sugar. So that first sentence, the average person, and it doesn't say in America, but this is the average American, consumes 3 pounds of sugar per week. Per week, 3 pounds. I have not done the math, but I'm thinking off the top of my head, that's what, like 156 pounds a year if we're going 52 weeks a year times 3. Somebody email me if my math's incorrect on that. So wow, that's a lot of sugar. The recommendations state, and this is the American guidelines, state that women need no more than 24 grams or 100 calories of added sugar per day, and men no more than 36 grams or about 150 calories of added sugar per day. So the top sources of added sugars are listed here. So we have soft drinks being number 1, candy number 2, cakes, cookies, and pies number 3, fruit drinks, and then dairy, desserts, and milk. And now milk, I want you to take note that that's the flavored milks, okay? Like chocolate strawberry or cream in your coffee. Milk, not just the low-fat dairy, but the added, if you're getting fruit on the bottom, yogurt, different things like that. And then dairy desserts would be, your frappuccinos, your ice cream, fruit on the bottom, yogurt as well could fall in that category. But so here's an example on the screen. You can see here's a serving size of Haagen-Dazs yogurt. I don't know if you can see that. It actually says the yogurt. What is that? So 5.5 tablespoons of sugar in this half a cup versus this carton, which can be easy to eat in one sitting if we're not paying attention, right? Look at all that sugar. Look at this. A can versus 12 ounce versus a 24 ounce. Whoa. And then this right here is supposed to show a fun size candy bar versus a large, shareables versus just a normal. And then sugars are hidden in things that most people typically eat in a day and may not think that there's an added sugar in there. So here is another example food model, once again my hand, in that picture, of what some common everyday food items may be that maybe you're consuming or somebody you know are, that are a source of added sugar. So to start, Nature Valley granola bars. 12 grams of added sugar. Now those are the ones that come 2 to a pack that have a lot of granola in there. 12 grams of sugar. Wow, if the recommendation for a female is no more than 24 grams per day, you're halfway there with just this little granola bar. 8 ounces of Gatorade, 15 grams. It's really hard to find a carton of Gatorade or a bottle of Gatorade that is only 8 ounces too. 3 ounces of chocolate chip cookie. So 3 ounce chocolate chip cookie, which is actually what appropriate serving size is, contains 16 grams of sugar. 12 ounce soda, 23 grams. So this right here is 23 grams of sugar. Wow. 6 ounces of a fruit yogurt, so that's the fruit on the bottom. An average container contains 32 grams of sugar. Holy smokes, you've already exceeded your recommendation for added sugars for the day, according to the American Dietary Guidelines. If you had a fruit yogurt with a granola bar, there's 44 grams of sugar. Okay, a muffin at a coffee shop, so like one of those big ones from Starbucks or, Big B, different things like that, just the giant muffins, 48 grams for a full muffin. And then a naked juice, so a common beverage that is often confused with being very healthy, actually contains 50 grams of added sugar. So it has more than a soda, to put that in perspective. It's almost like drinking a 24 ounce of soda, but a little bit worse. And so sugar has a toll on our heart, right? All 3 of these factors they contribute to our heart health. And so it's important that we monitor and we're making smart choices. Now, is it okay to have a chocolate chip cookie every once in a while? Yes, definitely. But it's these things that we consume daily, consistently, that really add up and can take a toll on our health. So it's also really important to read labels, okay? So how can we reduce our sugar intake? By reading labels. And the ingredient list is the best place to look. So know what other names to look for. So it's not always just sugar. There's actually 30 different names for sugar, including molasses, sucrose, fructose. Here you can see it says corn syrup, right? High fructose corn syrup. There's over 30 different names. And on labels, the closer it is to the top of the ingredient list, the higher that content. But because ingredient lists are done by weight, so it means that that item is more heavily weighted versus the lower item at the bottom of the list. So for a high sugar item, that would be greater than 15 to 20 grams per serving. Lower sugar items would be less than 5 grams per serving if you're reading a label. But the best way is to sweeten naturally using whole fruit, right? So if you really like that fruit on the bottom yogurt cup, try the plain yogurt, and then put slices of fruit in there. You're adding sweetness, but you're also adding lots of fiber, right? And we know that the fiber is good for lowering cholesterol. And then if you're trying to cut back, slowly cutting back on your sugar-sweetened beverages, looking for places where can I cut back. Oh, I noticed I typically have a sweetened iced tea in the afternoon. Okay, well, I'm slowly going to start cutting back on that, replacing it with water or decaf tea or unsweetened tea, looking for opportunities to make change. Okay, wow. So we talked about a lot of different things. I talked about fat, saturated fat, unsaturated fat, poly, mono, basically the take-home message for the fat is that we want to consume, we want to replace sources of saturated and trans fat in our diet with heart-healthy sources, specifically salmon, walnuts, avocado, almonds, olive oil, adding in plants to our diet because plants help to decrease cholesterol levels because they contain high amounts of fiber. Limiting our sodium intake for optimal heart health would be less than 1,500 milligrams a day. Doing that by reading labels, right? Seasoning with herbs and spices, and paying attention to see how many items of the salty six do I consume a day. Is there opportunity for change in that? Can I make substitutes? And then sugar. So no more than 24 grams of sugar per day for a female, no more than 36 for a man. Is there opportunity for change in sugar as well? Is there a food item I'm consuming frequently? Am I eating a Nature Valley granola bar every day? Is there another granola bar that I can look for in the grocery store that maybe has less sugar that I could swap it out for? Or could I do, a piece of fruit and nuts instead? So the weekly pledge has to do with each of those nutrients of concern. And I'd like to, feel free to pause the screen. I invite you to pause the screen and jot down 1 to 2 ways you're going to make either, you don't have to do all 3, but you could if you want. What's 1 or 2 ways you're going to make a healthier fat choice? How might you limit your sodium intake or evaluate your diet and assess an opportunity for a healthier option? And is there any sugar foods you may want to cut back on this week? So jot those down, and then I encourage you to continue to work on last week's pledge while slowly introducing this week's pledge as well. And so it may be easier for you to choose making a healthier fat choice this week, and then next week you want to add in sodium and then sugar, that's fine, or you can just pick one from each, so you have a fat choice, a sodium, and a sugar, whatever you feel is best. If you have questions on working on the weekly pledges or further questions on this topic, you are always welcome to make an appointment with one of the registered dietitians. If not, next week we will be talking about label reading, so further diving into these nutrients and what do we look for? How do we look for them? Where are they located on a food label? And then how can we further make healthier swaps, not only in cooking, but in grocery shopping too. Okay? So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.